So, hello again, everyone. I am Stella. I'm the Partnerships Director at Forward Action. I see names of charities that we work with, but for those of you who don't know us, we are a digital mobilization agency based here in the UK, and we work with progressive causes, charities, non-profits to help them maximize their impact through digital. So we work with our partners to develop digital strategies, campaigns, tactics, and tools to help them find and grow their audiences online and really kind of deepen their engagement with them, whether that's through, raising income or campaigning, ideally both, ideally everything really. And like I said, it's great to see some of our partners here today. So hello, special hello to you all. So obviously this is why today's topic is so important to us. A key building block of an effective digital mobilization program is having, a big pool of people who you can contact, who are aligned with your vision and who engage with your different asks. And the most effective way to do that is by building up your own data, your first party data, so you don't rely on the algorithm and whether it allows your message to reach them. We've seen what a huge, real difference that makes in terms of influencing policy, raising lots of money. And if you need some inspiration, we've had a few webinars recently, and there's some case studies on our website where you can hear, for example, from Dignity in Dying and the assisted dying bill that we've been helping them get through Parliament, or Surface Against Sewage and their big gift campaign and how much money they raised through that. So there's lots on our website to go through and all recordings to see if you want. So obviously the upcoming changes to opt-ins are a huge opportunity for our partners and for all charities. But the question is, how do we make the most of this and how do we also get it right? So really delighted that today you'll get to hear from our very own strategy director, Helen Hector. And we're also super pleased that Faye Brooks from Movement is joining us as well. Movement is a company that we work with quite closely. They give progressive organizations the digital tools that help them spark real conversations, drive real engagement, and win real life change. They put best-in-class tech in the hands of unions, NGOs, and progressive parties so they can mobilize supporters, protect rights, and push society forward. Faye works on the campaign success team, so they support clients to make the most of movement so they can create real-world impact. So I will hand over to Helen in one moment. Just a couple of housekeeping things from me before we move on to the content. As I said earlier, we will have a Q&A at the end, so please do keep asking questions throughout the session using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. One thing I want to note is that we're not lawyers and we're not legal experts, so it's unlikely that we'll be able to answer any kind of specific legal questions you have. We have the wonderful Florence here with us today, who works in the partnerships team here with me at Forward Action. And Florence is going to make sure that we collect all your questions so we can ask them at the end. And she will also help with any tech issues you might have. So let us know in the chat or by messaging us hosts directly if there's anything like sound or anything really that's not working for you. Feel also free to use the chat throughout the session to chat to others, share thoughts and reflections you have, and you should be able to enable closed captions at the bottom of the screen. Again, let us know if that's an issue. And again, like I mentioned briefly at the beginning, the session will be recorded. We'll send you a link to the recording next week alongside write-up of key points that we take away from today and any questions we don't manage to answer. Okay, and with that, I will turn my camera off and I'll hand over to Helen and Faye.
Thanks, Stella. Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us bright and early this morning. I hope it's nice and sunny where you are. It's sunny where I am, which is always a good start. Yes, so as Stella said, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest, I think, potential changes to happen to data regulation to affect the charity sector in quite a few years. Probably the biggest change since GDPR. If anyone was around in 2018 and working and can remember the fun and games that involved when we all had to adapt our sign-ups to that, I think this is a kind of on a par with that in terms of the opportunity for changing. It's a fairly niche subject. It's maybe not broad and exciting and innovation focused that we sometimes do, but it's also been one of the most subscribed webinars we've ever run. So there's obviously a lot of people that are really keen to know what is going on and how to make the best of it. We'll do our best to keep it really easy to understand. We want to keep it practical for you, lots of tips, and we want to keep it as interactive as we can. So there'll be a couple of polls as we go through, so you can kind of share how you're feeling and thinking, and see what your peers are thinking as well, because we know that's really valuable. So here's what we're going to go through in the next 50 minutes or so. We'll do a very quick recap on what is actually changing in the law. And then we'll talk about why we think this is exciting, because it is really exciting, but also why we need to get it right and what some of those risks are. And then for most of the webinar, we are going to be talking you through our checklist for success. So Faye and I have put together a really simple checklist, but hopefully really thorough as well, that you can take away and use in your organizations to give you the confidence to adapt to these changes and feel like you're on top of everything. So we'll talk you through that. And then, as Stella said, we've got time for Q&A at the end. So that's us. I'm going to hand over to Faye to talk about what is actually changing.
Thank you. Yeah, so just a quick recap of what's changing. There's a new bill going through Parliament, which means charities in the UK will soon be able to use a soft opt-in. So a soft opt-in is implied consent to contact people with marketing communications under a few certain conditions. That they're a registered charity, the direct marketing must aim to further the charity's charitable purposes, the data was collected in the process of expressing interest in offering support for or providing support to the charity, and individuals are given a simple way to opt out of marketing emails, both when they sign up and in each subsequent communication. The current status of things is a bit of a ping pong between the House of Commons and House of Lords over some AI copyright issues. That's unrelated to this clause, but it's holding things up slightly. So we're expecting to see this come through within the next few weeks or months. And it'll bring consent for email and mobile messaging in line with post and phone for charities. And it'll bring charities in line with what the commercial sector are already able to do.
Sorry. So that's what's changing, and we will we'll include a link to the actual bill, the data use and access bill, in the follow-up email, so you can track on the government website what is happening with the bill and when it's likely to get royal assent. We're going to do a quick poll, just to do a pulse check on how you are feeling about these changes. So it should have popped up on your screens if you can just pick one. No right or wrong answers, but yes, are you feeling generally excited about the changes? Are you curious, wanting to know more before you make up your mind? Are you a bit overwhelmed and confused with all the data and compliance legalities to get through, or are you more worried about the risks and the downsides? Okay, results are in. Fantastic. That's really great news. So lots of curiosity, as expected. Yes, I think we all feel like we need to know a bit more. But great that a good chunk of you are also feeling positive about the changes. That's really good to see. Okay, so while we're on that topic, we're going to talk through why it is exciting. So one of the biggest benefits of this change that I'm sure you will have been aware of and reading in the media coverage about it, is that a soft opt-in at the point where someone shares their data with you means you're going to be able to subscribe a higher percentage of people to your list than if you were using a hard opt-in. So that means you can grow your email and phone subscribers faster and for less, which is obviously great news for many of us. So if you're running, for example, paid lead generation projects using paid social or paid search, you should be able to get more subscribers for your investment. And then on this slide, we've just included some benchmarks just to give you an idea, if you're not doing this already and you don't have your own benchmarks, what it costs at the moment to run kind of attraction programs and generate cost per email leads. So this is our 2024 data that we've collected at Forward Action. This is all projects that we've worked on with partners So you can see our kind of hard opt-in cost per lead is around £1.65. We can also break that down by different issue area within the sector, because we see that different areas have different costs associated with them. So hopefully this gives you a useful benchmark. You can obviously compare your own if you have them. We know what it costs pretty thoroughly to get opted in email subscribers using the current hard opt-in process. We don't yet know what the soft-in version of this would be, but we would assume that it would be cheaper. And that's obviously great news because, as I'm sure you know, the costs to recruit new supporters are rising year on year. Most of these results here have been generated through Facebook specifically, but increasingly that's a bigger mix of Meta, of paid search, of platforms like TikTok. As the platforms become more fractured and people are on different places, the platforms themselves are obviously changing wildly at the moment. X used to feature in our programs, not so much anymore. And tracking is becoming harder. It's just all becoming a lot more challenging to recruit new supporters.
So in headlines you might have seen from the Direct Marketing Association, it's estimated charities could raise an additional £290 million a year from the contacts they'll be able to acquire through soft opt-in. So there's obviously huge potential here.
And as Stella mentioned at the top, we really feel strongly that first-party data is the future. So another reason this is good news. Obviously having your own contactable supporter base, it should be the foundation of your digital program. These are people you can talk to directly, you can talk to repeatedly. You're not relying on social platforms or the algorithm. And if you're doing this well and growing your first-party data, that probably means you've got an always-on attraction program running across paid social, paid search, and you're coupling that with really frequent varied and action-based emails or mobile messages that are keeping people engaged and driving them to take lots of action. So they're the headline, why this is exciting, why we need to get it right. So some of the risks around this, I think this is the biggest one that I've heard a lot of organizations say they're most worried about. And it relates to feeling like that you have consent to contact people and the potential risks to your brand if people feel that they didn't give you that consent in the first place. I think we all know that feeling of getting an email from a commercial, from a business or a brand that you're not quite sure how they got hold of your data, you don't remember signing up. It's really annoying and it does damage how you think about that brand. And I think people hold charities and causes to a higher standard than companies. So we definitely don't want people feeling that way about your organizations. And I think even within the commercial sector who have been able to use soft opt-ins around email and phone for a while, there's a real difference in how brands approach this. So for example, health and finance brands that require higher levels of brand trust from consumers tend to veer more towards using hard opt-in still, to make sure that they are really clearly getting consent around areas that are more sensitive, whereas the entertainment or retail sector are more likely to use a soft opt-in. I've picked out two examples you can see here. No judgment on either brand, Nuffield Health or Boden, not good or bad things to say, just an example of very different approaches. So the top one, you can see Nuffield Health. This is a sign-up form on their website if you're inquiring about their services. They have really clear language. You have to actively opt one of these into a specific channel to hear more from them. And then you have to tick another terms and conditions box. So they make it really clear. Boden, if you are buying some rather expensive clothing on their website and you go to check out, this is the opt-in that you get there. As you can see, you have to kind of click through to another page to opt out if you really want to do that. So most people are probably just going to skim over that and end up on their marketing list. So very different approaches, even in the commercial sector where they've been able to do this for a while. And obviously your organization needs to figure out where you feel comfortable between this kind of extreme range of how you do it.
So building on that, deliverability can obviously really suffer with unresponsive lists or spam reports. So having strong deliverability is so important. Without that good sender reputation, we risk hitting spam filters and being unable to reach our supporters at all. So I think there's a really good case for really explicit opt-ins here. So double opt-ins can be useful. So that could look like asking supporters to confirm their email after signing up to ensure they're really bought in. And also segmenting according to requested individual preferences as well can be useful. So explicit opt-ins can support both these things and maintain that sender reputation and really strong deliverability.
And then also just to mention, obviously, GDPR isn't going anywhere. This is just an amendment to how charities can operate within those regulations. So we do still need to comply with GDPR overall. And that means you still need to offer people a way to unsubscribe at that point of sign up and then in all ongoing communications. Papa John's, I've just pulled this example that I was looking for anyone that kind of didn't toe the line. This is a few years ago now, but they were fined over not using data responsibly and not giving people that opportunity to opt out. So there are real consequences of fines and brand damage if you fall on the wrong side of the law still. I think this is unlikely to affect the charity sector. I think most teams are err on the side of caution, would never want to knowingly kind of break the GDPR rules. I think it just heightens the risk that with things changing, that, you know, if it's not coordinated and checked properly, that things may slip through the cracks and inadvertently put out a form that may not be compliant. So yeah, we definitely want to make sure that no one is doing that.
So I think that really builds the case for excellent record keeping. So obviously with these changes, you'll need to be able to have a clear record of opt-ins. So you know exactly who's opted in explicitly and who you're able to contact due to new soft opt-ins. This is obviously vital for GDPR purposes, allowing you to easily let supporters know why you're contacting them. But you'll also want to be able to readily distinguish your audience based on opt-in, allowing you to segment accordingly. This is something that we've worked on at Movement, so we're ready to support these different consent options. These can be designed by you for your supporters, and it's all set up to facilitate this clear dynamic record keeping.
And then as well as thinking about your CRM, obviously you need to think about your onward supporter journeys as well. So email and mobile journeys, they need adapting if you're going to change your opt-in approach. Otherwise, I think some of the benefits might not follow through. So for example, we need to adapt to the fact that people might not quite realise why they've ended up on your list. They might need a bit more convincing about the value of your comms. Or it might just be that they're less likely to open your emails if their inboxes are even more crowded than they are at the moment. And I think, as any email specialist knows, I'm sure we have many on the call today, that if you want to turn those numbers on a database into real world impact, you have to work really, really hard to do that with your emails and mobile messages. But luckily, the good news is that we've got lots of experience and lots of ideas about how you can do that. So let's jump straight into our checklist for success. So yeah, as I say, Faye and I have put this together. We hope it'll be a really practical tool that you can take away and share with your team. So here it is in a nutshell. It's just 6 steps, feels very simple, that take you right from the beginning of understanding what is changing and making a plan, right through to rolling it out, looking at the data and adjusting it into the future as the months go on. So step 1 is really simple, but it is understanding the changes and making a plan. So being here today is you're already ticking this one off in many ways. So understanding what is changing. We'll obviously have this webinar that you can use. We'll have we've turned these slides into a resource that we'll also share with you. So you'll have a PDF that you can share within your teams that contains all of this information. So yeah, sharing it with your organization, making sure all the right people know what's coming, and bringing that group together. Obviously, if you've got compliance teams, data teams, you'll need to bring all your supporter facing people together, your marketing team. So, you know, this reaches into a lot of different areas. And then once you've got the right group of people in the room, you can start to make a plan. So that just could look like mapping out all the different options available to you and agreeing which route you want to go down. And we think it's likely that organizations may have a range of different approaches across their platforms and products. So for example, you may decide that on your petitions or your donation forms, that feels like a good place to use more of a soft opt-in. But for example, if you have sign-up points to access services or information about your cause, and that's a bit more sensitive, you may decide to use more explicit opt-ins there. But just deciding what those are and what you're going to do is the first step.
So to avoid getting into a data mess with all of this, you want to make sure that your CRM is ready. So here's an example of just some screenshots from within the Movement platform. So you want to ensure that your CRM can distinguish between different types of consent and create a tagging system for different opt-in variants. So you'll know who has explicitly opted in, who's come in through soft opt-ins, and you'll be able to tag anything else as well. You want to set up segmentation capabilities based on supporter consent type, and then make sure you're testing data flows to prevent any potential data management issues.
And then once you've got your CRM ready and you've got your plan ready, you can start looking at your points of sign up. So obviously this applies to digital and offline points of sign up as well, anywhere where you're asking people to give you their email address or mobile number. A good place to start is with an audit. So it could be as simple as a spreadsheet where you go through your website and just write down all the URLs of where your forms are. On this slide, we've just put some examples from the Greenpeace UK website, just to prompt you on the different places that you might have data capture forms. If you're a fairly big organization, you can see how this quickly becomes quite a big task. So you could have, for example, petitions, campaign signups. You've probably got a donation form that captures data. You might have places where you're signing up volunteers or people are inquiring about your services. So yeah, lots of different places. And I think underneath those sign-up forms, you may even have different platforms providing all of those things. So for example, your donation platform could be different to your action taking platform. So once you've audited all your points of sign-up, you then need to go and speak to those providers and just check that they are ready to support any changes that you might want to make to your opt-ins. I think most providers will know this is coming and hopefully be ready to accommodate that. Movement certainly are. Forward Action's Blueprint platform is certainly ready to switch to a soft opt-in if that's what you'd like to do, but it's worth double checking that. And then you can obviously go ahead and start changing your forms, crucially test them before anything goes live, check that data is flowing in the right way, that the right tags are going onto your CRM. And then also just to say, if this feels big and overwhelming, you don't have to do everything on day one. You can phase it, you can prioritize sign up forms that have the most traffic, for example, which is where you're going to see the most benefit. Yeah, and you're not going to suddenly become uncompliant overnight. Things are easing up rather than getting more restrictive. So take your time, do it in a way that is the right pace for your organization.
So another thing you might want to think about is enhancing supporter journeys for people who have come in through soft opt-in. So because people have come in through soft opt-in are a different audience, they may not be as active and engaged in your organisation, and they might not be aware that they gave consent to be contacted. So I'm sure you're running email or SMS welcome journeys already, but I think for soft opt-ins, you'll want to make these journeys even simpler. So there's an example here of how you can do that through automations within Movement. Make them really clearly linked to the action that people have taken. And they're really a make or break piece of content in determining whether people who've come in through opt-ins ultimately unsubscribe or keep opening and clicking. So definitely something to think about.
And we've broken this step down into a few slides because it's such an important one, and there's a few different things you can do here. So just to kind of illustrate that, as Faye just said, making that first message really clearly connected to why they signed up. Here's an example of email from Oxfam on a attraction project that we worked on with them. And you can see here that right from the start, it tells them why they're receiving the email, so they immediately make the connection and don't go to unsubscribe. Obviously, that means having bespoke welcome journeys for all your kind of sign-up points, which is obviously quite a big time-consuming thing if you're not already doing it. But even if it's just, editing that first paragraph of text, there's simple ways to do it. And then another example of what you can do in your welcome journeys, we wanted to share that point around showing the value that you're adding by sending emails to people. So there's so many ways that you can add value in your welcome series. Hopefully you're doing it already because it's a really important principle. At Forward Action, we always talk about the importance of asking people to do things in a welcome series. It sets them up to expect that they are playing an active role in your organization. It's definitely great to ask for things, but you need to balance that with the value that you're giving to people as well. And there's loads of ways you can do that. As I say, you could be offering advice, practical support. You could be offering resources for groups like schools or communities. Value can come in the form of, for example, a voice note from your CEO, linked to within an email. A voice note from a beneficiary or volunteer is a really powerful way to show people that they're important to you and to connect them to your cause. And this example here is an email from the Shannon Trust, who we partnered with recently on a welcome series and attraction program. This is a poem that was written by one of their mentors, sharing their personal experience and motivations for becoming a mentor. It's really powerful, it's really valuable, and I think it brings to life exactly what they do, and is just such a great email to get in your inbox.
So this is something you want to do on an ongoing basis, and that's watch the data. So you want to compare the value of soft opt-in and explicit consent supporters, factoring in things like awareness, donor income, campaign actions, and any retail or volunteering impact. We'll definitely learn as we go by watching the data over time and responding to what's working well for our supporters and what isn't. And that might look completely different for each of us here. At Movement, you have analytics to support you with this within the platform. You can also seamlessly integrate with other software like Metabase, for example, to get all the supporter insight you need to help you track these trends. And then once you have this clearer picture of the impact of soft opt-ins, you can share that across your organisation and then decide the right approach and make sure you're responding and chopping and changing things as those trends emerge.
And so on this slide, we've just put some again, these are Forward Action benchmarks just for comparison. If you have your own benchmarks, that's fantastic. If you don't, then feel free to use these. But these are example benchmarks from an email program, like a full list email program with people that are recruited using a hard opt-in. So once you know what your kind of opt-in rate is, your kind of action rates around fundraising or campaigning, it will be really interesting to see with subscribers coming in through soft opt-in whether they're matching these engagement metrics or whether they're underperforming or even overperforming. So that's going to be really interesting to see. And then our final step in the plan, wow, we've whizzed through this really quickly. Our final step is just to be ready to adjust it, basically. Yeah, no plan is set in stone, and as time goes on, we will all be, as Faye says, we will all be learning from this. So yes, for example, if you are A/B testing your opt-in statements, which we really recommend you do, you can see a real difference between two different kind of framings of how you ask people to opt in. We test this all the time at Forward Action. Yeah, that's worth doing, and you want to make sure you're using the best performing framings. The example on this slide, this is from an A/B test we ran with Dignity in Dying, and we're going to do a quick quiz actually here. So have a look at version A and version B and think about which of these opt-in statements you think performed best. Give you a second to read them. If you're feeling brave, you can put your answer in the chat if you want everyone to know you're right. Give people a minute, or you can just keep it in your head. Okay, lots of A's. Lots of A's. Oh, now some B's coming through. Okay, very confident, Michelle. On my button. Yes, if you said A, congratulations. Yes, you're right. Version A had a 27% increase in the opt-in rate compared to version B. To be fair, they're both best practice statements. They're both really strong. So it was a bit of a tough question to ask. Version B has much more of that fear of missing out framing that we find works really well. People want to hear about what is going to happen next, particularly if you are campaigning on an issue or responding to an emergency, for example. But version A had that really great line around, we're so close to winning, stay in touch to hear what happens next. But yeah, definitely test these. As you can see, you know, that's a big increase in the number of people that will end up in your database. And obviously, if you're testing your welcome journeys as well, as we recommend, you can be looking at which emails are performing well. If any are underperforming, you can switch up the content that's in them. You can change the calls to action. And then critically, if you're thinking about adapting your plan, it's really worth weighing up all the evidence across your program before making quick decisions. So, for example, you might find that your unsubscribe rate on your email list goes up a bit as you're bringing more kind of soft opt-ins on. But you also want to be looking at your income from email, for example, and if that has also gone up by a bigger amount, and especially that will need to be something you look at over months rather than just days, you may decide that the trade-off is worth it, that you're raising more income, even though you've got more of a churn on your list as people unsubscribe. So lots of data to basically look at and make sure you're making the right choices. So that's it. That's our checklist. Here's a quick recap of all the steps. Hopefully that was helpful. That will get you off to a good start. We're going to do a quick poll question again for you. So the question is, you may not have decided this yet. You may definitely still be weighing things up. But if you have any kind of leaning at the moment towards what you or your organization is thinking of doing, it would be great to understand what that is. I'm sure everyone else would love to know what other organizations are thinking. So are you planning to adopt a soft opt-in across most of your sign-up forms? Are you veering more towards continuing to use a hard opt-in? Or are you thinking of using a mix of types depending on the product or the channel? I'll give you a moment to think. Okay, really interesting. Yes, I expected quite a lot of people would be leaning towards a mix. So that's good to see. I think it definitely makes sense. But yeah, lots of surprisingly few people planning to continue with the hard opt-in, which is super interesting. And yeah, I think reflects the fact that most people are excited about this change. Thank you. That's really helpful. Hopefully that helps you as well. We can put this data in the write-up as well. So if you want to take that back to your organization, you can do. Okay, so we just wanted to mention at the end, yeah, if you're working through this and you would like some support, either with thinking through a plan for how to go about this, whether that's auditing your sign-up points, whether that's actually doing the practical work of updating your forms, whether you're looking for a CRM or tools that Movement could perhaps help with, or running some A/B tests. There's a whole host of things that Forward Action and Movement can obviously help with. So here's our details if you would like to chat. Do feel free to get in touch. And I think that takes us towards the Q&A.
It does. Thank you so much, both. This was really succinct and hopefully practical for people to take away and kind of really start implementing in their organization. So thank you very much. We've had a few questions through and we have a bit of time to run through them. If you have any more questions, feel free to add them to the Q&A. We'll try and get to them now, and if we don't, we'll answer them afterwards. So the first question we received, and I think it's a theme that came up in a couple of other questions as well. Would you recommend explaining the change in the law to new supporters who end up on your list? Or is it rather a case of convincing them, as you said, as to why they've ended up on your list in terms of why your organization is great or of interest to them?
Oh, great question. I mean, I don't think we've had a conversation about this explicitly. I mean, instinctively, I would lean towards not explaining a change in the law. I mean, for one, it takes quite a lot of time to explain it, and like it's taken us a good, well, yeah, it takes a while to explain what that is to people. I think by then you've probably used up all your comms attention span. So yes, if it's new supporters coming onto your list, I think I would put all your energy into making that first communication really brilliant and really clear, and doing everything you can to keep them subscribed. I think there's probably a question to think about if people start complaining. Hopefully, you know, levels of people actually complaining about receiving comms would be low, but you may decide that you want to put in place a response that kind of includes that explanation when you're getting back to those individuals. Yeah, so that just to reassure them that you haven't done anything that goes against GDPR. But yeah, I don't know, Faye, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, my first thought was that just to have a really clear response ready for anyone that then writes in and says, you know, how did I end up receiving this email? Just making sure that you've got those responses prepared and ready to go so that you're ready to support people and get back to them.
That's a really great tip. Thank you, Faye. And we've had a few questions, people asking when the change in law will actually come into effect. And I think the answer is we don't really know. Is that right? Like, we're still waiting. Initially, we were told it will be maybe early this year, around Easter time. That's now passed. Then it was early spring. Now they say early summer. Do you know if there's been any update on that recently, on the timeline?
I know that so it's at the stage where the bill basically gets sent backwards and forwards between the House of Commons and the House of Lords. I think there's been an unprecedented amount of backwards and forwards. I think it's now happened 5 times. And as Faye mentioned, it's the AI clauses, particularly around copyright. You might have seen that in the news, that's the kind of point that the Lords and the Commons can't agree on. So yeah, we're kind of stuck in this limbo. Once they agree, then it should be a fairly quick process, I understand, to get royal assent and become law. So yeah, as Stella says, it could be 2 weeks, but hopefully at some point this year.
Great, thank you. Well, keep your eyes peeled. I'm sure we will all find out soon enough. Then we've had a few questions about essentially having 2-tier lists, right? So we have a list of people who opted in and into receiving communications from a charity before the law change, and then another list that will start essentially building after the change in law. So somebody said that their understanding is that you can't retrospectively apply the soft opt-in to historic consents, which I believe is true, the way that I've interpreted the bill, but feel free to let us know otherwise. And so they say, if that's true, is it not the case that we'll have 2 silos of consent where a supporter can shift from silo 1 to silo 2 if they show an interest in our charity? And practically, they will need to distinguish between these 2 silos. Any advice on how to apply this? So that's question 1, how to apply that kind of shift. I think that's maybe more a question on kind of the CRM kind of side. Another question is around kind of the comms. Should we be concerned about having that list, and like, how do we adapt our communications to those 2 levels? Now, these are 2 like very broad questions. Let me know if you want me to repeat them.
I'd say on the first question, that really is all about just making sure your CRM is neat and tidy and up to date. Just making sure you've got really good ways of tracking how people have opted in and tracking those shifts as well. A bit like, I guess, how we do already in terms of, you know, some people unsubscribe and then come back to us and then they unsubscribe again. So it's just adding another layer to that, I suppose.
Exactly, and I would just add that obviously the language you use at the kind of point of sign up or where people are showing their data, like that's up to you to choose what that says. I think, you know, obviously work with your compliance teams, but the approach of Forward Action that we always recommend is to just be as broad as possible in what you're asking people or what you're saying people will hear from you. If you really narrow that down, for example, to, you know, a particular like newsletter, that sort of ties you in knots and means that you're going to have to keep checking your consent with every email that you send out. Ideally, you want to be able to send most of your communications to most of your list. Essentially, that's what you're aiming for. And as long as, you know, you want to be able to send fundraising, campaigning, volunteering, impact updates to everybody, because we know that by sending them a really wide range of actions, they're much more likely to take action with you and find the thing they want to do, and they're much more likely to see the impact that you're having. So yeah, just anything you can do to not sort of tie yourself in knots and restrict what you're sending would be our general advice.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think linked to that, we had a question around relevance and value in communications. Do you have any tips, you know, if a charity is sending more emails to more people, how do they ensure that the content is always engaging, inspiring, relevant to kind of their past interactions, rather just having very specific asks? Any tips on that front?
Oh, we have so many tips on that. We could talk about that all day. I think it's a really common challenge that we hear from our partners is often teams feel like they don't have enough to say and they don't feel able to support, for example, a weekly email to all their supporters with a different action in. And once we start working through that and workshopping it, we often uncover that actually there's so much you could be talking about and asking people to do. So our first top tip is to stop sending those newsletters with 7 things in. That could be 7 emails that you send over a few week period. If you put one action in an email, people are much more likely to take that action because it feels urgent and it feels important. If you give them lots of choices, they're only gonna, you know, either pick one or feel overwhelmed or feel like none of them are important. So just by splitting up your newsletter, that's a really easy win. But yes, even just thinking like working closely with your social teams, if people are posting social content, could you turn that content into an email? Have you got an interesting piece of news to share? Have you got a story that you can share? That, you know, can you go behind the scenes? Can you start interviewing some of your volunteers, your beneficiaries, your staff? Can you do polls and do actions where the supporter gets to have more of a say, either by sharing their own experiences or stories, messages of solidarity, surveys. Yeah, there's so much that we can that we often find is under the surface, but it does take time and energy, 1, to uncover all of those things, and then 2, to turn those into emails. And obviously, if teams are really busy and stretched, it can feel like a lot to do. Faye, I don't know if you maybe we should talk also about SMS, where if people are thinking about that side of things.
Yeah, that was something that was coming to mind in terms of yeah, the sort of low bar context rather than, you know, sending a really long email. At Movement, we have SMS and WhatsApp. You can really take advantage of sending really rich content and media. So you can both send and receive voice notes, images, videos. We've seen some really interesting things done with, you know, just sending a quick voice note update, kind of brings people into the huddle, gets them like behind the scenes of what's going on. You know, it doesn't have to be a huge, perfectly planned piece of content. Often the kind of imperfect things work a little bit better. And yeah, just really bring people in. I think on this question specifically as well, it's probably just really looking at those initial supporter journeys and welcome journeys, and just making sure that they're really specific. So you're not confusing soft opt-in people, you're just being really clear and upfront about why you're emailing. And I think that can be dynamic and fun as well. You know, it doesn't have to be a boring, like, this is why you're receiving communications from us. It can be a really exciting update, and maybe including some kind of rich content in there as well would be really useful to kind of bring that to life.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've really seen how kind of being creative and how you get that content across really makes such a big difference. Great, thank you. One clarifying question from someone was whether the benchmarks we shared were from Forward Action clients or kind of broader sector. I believe they're from our clients. Is that right, Helen? Yeah, great. And do you know, somebody's asked if you are aware of any studies on the impact of using a soft opt-in on deliverability rates. Are you aware of anything?
You know what? It's really hard to find. I did try and do this research. I was trying to find examples from the commercial sector of how brands deliverability varies. There's very little in the public domain that I could find, at least. I imagine brands tend to keep that data quite close to their chest. So nothing I could see. If other people know of any, definitely please put it in the chat. But I think certainly for the charity sector, which feels obviously has a very different set of circumstances to the commercial sector, I think it's going to be a case of finding our way together and just sharing data and benchmarking the data as we go. But yes, if anyone knows of anything, I would definitely love to see that as well.
Great. Then we've had a few questions that are specific to the law change. I'm not sure we can go into that because it hasn't been finalized yet around kind of things that we might need to record, what happens to double opt-ins. But yeah, I think we'll just have to wait and see on some of those. Somebody did ask if this law change applies only to registered charities or relevant to non-profits as well. That came up recently, and I think my understanding is that at the moment it's registered charities only, but they're considering expanding it. Is that right?
I'm not sure about the expansion side of it, but yes, if you read the bill, the bill is very long, but you can read it, and it does. It mentions registered charities in England, and then the equivalent, the slight variation, but yes, the equivalent of registered charities in Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland as well, which I realise does rule out, quite large parts of the sector if you're, a campaigning group.
Exactly. I think that is all we have time for, because the rest of the questions are probably requiring slightly deeper responses, and we have to finish at 10:02. But we will go through all of your questions and we'll do our best to answer them in the write-up that we'll do. As we've mentioned earlier, we will send you all a recording sometime next week. We will also do a write-up on our website, and we'll have a little resource available for you all as well, with some of those tips that Helen and Faye shared at the end of their talk. So hopefully that will be useful. So if you think of any other questions after the session today, just drop us an email and we'll do our best to reply. Thank you so much, Helen and Faye. This was incredibly useful. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. Always a delight to have so many of you on these calls. Enjoy your day, and we'll be in touch very soon.